It is wonderful to be here amongst friends, lots of familiar faces I can see out in the audience. Unfortunately, with my introduction, some of that link has already been built. But before we do talk, and I am obviously going to deliver a bit of a speech about why I think today's agenda and what's being launched today is so important, I actually am just going to channel my inner Gina for a minute and just recognize for everybody in the room, like, how probably tired we're feeling right now, how possibly hard this year has been. I know I certainly feel that in Parliament, but we are up against new battles, new challenges in our communities. Our work perhaps feels like it's got a greater sense of urgency with the changing political escalation that we're seeing that brings with it, for you guys leading in your community, I'm sure huge challenges, both personally and for your organizations, how you help your communities to navigate things. So I'm just going to offer a little bit of that vulnerability and say, like, I cannot wait for that Christmas holiday to come around. You can probably hear I'm just about recovering from a cold, and 10 days ago, my little one and my husband were in a car accident. They're fine, but they had a car accident, which means my little one's not sleeping, so I had very little sleep last night as well. So if at any point I'm tripping over and getting myself back up again, that's exactly why. But I say that not for sympathy, but to simply remind us all that we are enough and we are doing important and excellent work. But give yourselves a pat on the back after today. Take that energy, but take a rest and come back with renewed vigor and energy next year, because we have to go again and we've got to go stronger and harder. So now, if you like, for the more formal part of the speech. But yeah, I'm really proud to be with you today, not just as a politician being asked to speak, but as a colleague who's been in the trenches with you. I am looking at somebody who literally started that journey with me, a youth worker who brought me into youth work, John Barker. I'm going to pick him out in the room there. When 17 years ago or so, I started volunteering in a youth club, thinking that it would be something I'd do on my Tuesday evenings, and as it turned out, it would become the whole of my work and the reason that led me to wanting to be in Parliament, and then the reason, again, why I'm stood here today. But in the meantime, I've worked with some amazing organisations linked in with the FEA, whether that was Greenhouse Sports and the wonderful work they do, utilising sport as a tool for changing the direction of children and young people's lives, with Right to Succeed, which I'll speak a little bit more about shortly, and their amazing place-based work in places like Blackpool, or also with Big Change, another organisation that many of you will be familiar with, and I spent some time working with them on some of their kind of systems thinking work as well. So your neighbourhood to national strategy and plan really captures for me a simple but powerful truth, that if we want to build that country where no child's success is determined by their background, then we must address inequality at every level. Because where children live, where families turn for support, where systems are designed and where policies are shaped, and we must do all of that together. As we all know, inequality does not begin in adulthood. It begins sometimes often before birth and into early childhood. It begins in the places that we grow up and in the opportunities we do or we may not have access to. And so our response must be equally comprehensive, both locally and nationally. Evidence still shows that education is the primary determinant of where children fall on the income distribution relative to their parents. And honestly, I think what's holding us back is that we've not fully grasped this in recent years, and education has not had the focus that I believe it requires. It needs to be put back at the heart of our national life and at the heart of the national conversation, but it also needs that in the local. We need to listen to the partners who are in this room and in other rooms in our communities. But when we do, it gives me hope that through a place-based approach, we can tackle that geographical disadvantage together. And I'm really proud that this Labour government is rightly putting children's interests back at the heart of the policy discussion and decision-making. And certainly if you look at how Rachel Reeves talks about this as a priority for her, when Keir Starmer talks about it, or indeed, of course, Bridget Phillipson, we really start to get a sense of the way that there is a difference in what's happening now, perhaps compared to recent history. And the importance of mission-based government, I think, is also key in encapsulating that. Because whether it's with the expansion of free school meals, the introduction of free breakfast clubs, the rollout of funded early years education, the changes to apprenticeships and the investment just over the weekend of over £800 million to tackle the NEET problem through the youth guarantee, we're seeing time and time again how this government are putting their money where their mouth is and really starting to look at all those steps along a young person's journey that can be the difference in helping them to achieve their potential wherever they start in life. But of course, as we look to the future, we've got more challenges on the horizon, whether that's looking at the Future Schools White Paper, and certainly for me, something that's really important is how we get that piece around inclusion and getting from where we are right now on SEND to a much better place. And I know how much the government really wants to take people on that journey. And so hopefully lots of you in this room and across the country will have the chance to actually engage directly with Georgia Gould as Minister and through some of the listening exercises and co-creation groups that are now up and running. Because the government recognises that tackling barriers to opportunity isn't just the right thing to do, it's also the economically right thing to do. I say it time and time again, we can't afford to get it wrong because morally it doesn't sit right, but we also can't afford to get it wrong because what we need right now is for our economy to be growing, and that will only happen when it's growing across every part of this country, and that will only happen when children across every part of this country have the opportunity to build their skills, to have the jobs locally, and to put their creativity and their potential to use in the local economy as well. So today I'll speak briefly on the importance of us working together, the central role of place-based interventions, and the collaboration that's required between national and local government, as well as the members here in this room and with communities, to make this change real and lasting and something that permeates and actually turns the tide on the current situation that we're in terms of levels of inequality and that disconnect between where you're born and where you end up. So working together to ensure that every child thrives. Inequality is stubborn, we know, because it's systematic. It is held in place by a web of factors that no single organisation, no matter how brilliant you might be individually, can tackle alone. Health, education, housing, employment, safety, social capital, they all interact. They reinforce one another and they shape life chances long before any child sits an exam or applies for a job. So that means, of course, the solutions must be systemic as well, and that requires cross-sector partnership in every sense of that phrase. The government's child poverty strategy, published last week, has this principle at its heart, and it is an ambitious attempt to reset our approach to child poverty. It's focusing in on tackling some of the costs of raising children and, of course, the importance of lifting the two-child cap, but also reducing the number of children living in temporary accommodation. And I remember it literally brought me to tears at the Select Committee, just reckoning with the fact that 72 children had died between 2019 and 2024 in this country because of their housing conditions, and how we had to do everything possible to stop that. And I'm really glad that last week we're starting to show the direction of travel and taking that seriously. The latest figures show in my constituency of Hyndburn that the relative rates of poverty sit at 38.6%. That's nearly 1 in 3 children, and nearly 1 in 3 children who live in absolute poverty, which is double the national average, and certainly is something that keeps me up at night in terms of wanting to do everything that I can to change that situation. So over 7,000 children in my constituency who will need to overcome that barrier of poverty and their family income in order to reach the same opportunities that those who are better off might find much more easy to walk into. And sitting on the Housing, Communities and Local Government Committee, it gives me a unique perspective into the issues that are holding back that potential for collaboration that I think we will explore a little bit more shortly on the panel. It's often frustrating, I think, we can individually see that lack of coming together, and the government, through the mission-led approach to government, is trying to really practically look at how we bring some of those barriers down. So secondly, on place-based interventions, for all our national ambitions, change happens locally. And I've certainly seen that time and time again in my work. It is, apologies. No, I'm going right here. And members of Parliament often feel keenly, as they divide themselves between their home constituencies and Westminster, that kind of difference, particularly between London and outside of London, but also the difference in between what the national conversation they might be having and then what's happening locally in their community. And I'm an advocate for place-based work because it recognises that context shapes opportunity and that those closest to a community often are best positioned to drive the solutions. And we need to be serious and purposeful about listening, understanding, and working with local residents, organisations, and local leaders to help them design solutions. Because when they're brought into the change in that way, the change happens differently, and I think always lasts more effectively and doesn't get thrown, I guess, by the changes of policy and the things that happen sometimes too quickly at the national level. And certainly in Blackpool, some of the things that I saw were, we brought young people in to being part of the decision-making table. So it was nothing about us without us. Young people who'd had experience of being in Blackpool, round that table, guiding our decision-making, challenging teachers on their careers strategy, holding them to account and saying, it didn't work for me, actually, or the way that your culture and your school permeated meant that was part of the cause for why it became neat. Difficult conversations that started to then unlock something different in how we worked together. We looked at things like, the specifics of the local labour market and what that actually meant for our careers offering in schools. We looked at problems with data and systems and how we could start to get organisations to work better to overcome that. And it was only through kind of getting people around the table and genuinely believing in their ability to find the answers that we got to something that I think is probably, hopefully, really going to shift the dial for people in Blackpool. So, our support for children and young people must be locally responsive, embedded and engaged, while championed from the centre, and that's certainly what I will be doing. Place-based work is not a substitute for national ambition, but it is the foundation on which national progress can be built. We've all seen what happens when policy is designed centrally without regard for local experience, and I'm sure we can all bring to mind examples and roll our eyes slightly at where that happens. It misses the nuance, it misunderstands local challenges, and it risks wasting resources. But when national and local government work in partnership, we can unlock something really powerful, which is why I'm so excited to be here today and hear more about the Fair Education Alliance's place-based collaborations with the mayoral combined authorities. Although I will always say, remember that we're not mayoral areas. Lancashire doesn't have a mayor yet. Let's make sure we can learn as quickly as possible and then get those ideas and opportunities out to those areas without mayors as well. National government can set the vision, the direction, and the scale, whether that's improving early years outcomes, raising education standards, or supporting families, of which all, hopefully, you're seeing the government is doing. But it is absolutely critical to deliver the level of change our country needs, is how we will work alongside the most ambitious, devolution agenda ever seen in England, which is what today hopefully helps us start to explore. Labour's mission to break down barriers to opportunity is a national mission, but the FEA strategy reminds us that building it upward from neighbourhoods is strategic. What keeps me going when it's tough is imagining a country where every child starts school ready to learn, where every young person has access to enriching experiences beyond the classroom, where parents do not have to choose between paying bills and supporting their child's development, where businesses partner with communities to create meaningful pathways into work, and where local leaders can plan for the future and not just scramble to manage the latest crisis. Inequality is created by systems, but my hope is that we can also undo it by systems if and when and how we work together. So I know how needed this work is, and the Fair Education Alliance are in a brilliant position to foster collaboration and systems change from neighbourhoods to national. I'm delighted to hand over to Rachel Parkin, Director of Place-Based Collaboration at the FEA, for their announcement of the collaboration partnerships. Thank you.